Good evening, everyone. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and I hope you enjoy the stories that I put together today for you all. So I wanted to start the story with these two pictures. I captured both of these images on my cell phone a little over 2 years apart. One of the pictures I took them in Portland, and the other one I took it in Paris. I'd ask you to guess which is which, but I have yet to see swans in the Willamette. And honestly, when I think about it, if I did see swans in the Willamette, I don't know if that would be a good or bad sign. When I was trying to figure out what to share with you all this evening, I went back to these two pictures from two seemingly different cities. But in looking closer at these two images, I noticed that in both of them, I was sitting on the East Bank with friends during the evening to enjoy the sunset and decompress after a long day. This is something that I'm reminded isn't really a reality for all people living near a river, even in both of these cities. And a thought that I'd like to keep in mind as I work on Superfund issues and other environmental justice issues in Portland through coalitions and also with a lot of the people on this call today. My family is from South Africa, and in the traditional society of my father's people, the Zulu, rivers and lakes play an important role in our daily lives and activity, especially for traditional women's collective culture. Rivers and lakes are places for women and children to gather, work, and play. I actually remember visiting my clan's homeland and seeing women carrying buckets and clay pots on their heads and arms from the river back to their homesteads. And this must be an image a lot of you may have seen in different campaigns and stuff that specifically talk about African water. Often these women walk for kilometers to find clean water, but they're always in the company of another person. My mother's people, the Pedi, are from the north of South Africa and inhabit a region where water is scarce and sacred in nature. Luckily, her family settled in an area with a well, but as the region faces more frequent droughts, I've seen and experienced the level of the water table declining over the years. Having been raised between these two cultures and experiencing others through friends, acquaintances, and my travels, I realized that water is often a central body and important aspect, both literally and mystically. In the physical world, rivers, lakes, and seas are entities around which human and non-human communities are built and live and connect to each other and the rest of the world. Although the collaborative doesn't always have the opportunity to physically meet along the river, and I know earlier we kind of talked about the possibility of coming back together in person, and hopefully that will happen. The Willamette River is what essentially brings us together in these spaces and connects all of us in our work. When I moved here for college, I didn't know much about Oregon or the Pacific Northwest or even the Willamette. My personal journey and appreciation for the city started through canvassing in East Portland with Friends of Trees, and I came to understand more about the inequalities and impacts of low tree canopy coverage. I have since become embodied in the Willamette River since working at PHCC on the Superfund site, and most importantly, as a Northwest and former downtown Portland resident. Through this work, I've come to learn more about the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Klickitat as Yellowash mentioned earlier, and the Clackamas bands of Chinook and other tribes who inhabited these lands for thousands of years. They gathered their food and traded with each other along the Willamette, the Columbia, and their tributaries. Tribal sovereigns continue to practice their traditions and ceremonies in this river and fish, as do many other communities who call this place home. Within the Braided River campaign, we have an art group which is working on a portrait project, which was just a slide before this one. And we invited local artists and muralists to paint portraits that represent the people of various communities that have lived along the river and worked and played, and have since become displaced as a result of discriminatory zoning practices, land use laws, and have also been exposed to harmful chemicals and pollutants. In this project, we hope to connect the people and stories of the past to the present so we can collectively envision a future and acknowledge and begin to repair the harm that was and continues to be done to this day. There are still communities in Linton and Northwest Portland living and working near fossil fuel tanks and industry and are at risk of being displaced and currently exposed to harmful pollutants. I know the story of the Willamette doesn't start or end in the moment we're living in and will continue on beyond any of our lives, even mine, even though I'm not that old yet. But the Willamette and its surrounding communities have and will face many challenges in their course. There's a Zulu proverb that goes, Yonke kamoya manzi, inontombo wayo, which literally means every course of water has its source. And though I know the literal source of the Willamette is the Columbia, I also know that every living and non-living entity, whether it be a person from the past or present, or any of our favorite fish and other lovely river critters, have an impact on its course. I hope that every person who comes into contact with the river, especially people who have the power to change its course, do so for the benefit of current and future generations. I look forward to hearing your Willamette stories in subsequent meetings, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share mine.